Board of Education meeting for USD230 to order. Please collect the roll.
Mrs. Milius? Here. Mr. Ewing? Mrs. Sealing? Mr. Hoffman? Mr. Updike?
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell? Here. Mr. Anderson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. Approval of the agenda.
So move. Second.
It's moved and seconded for approval of the agenda. Any comments, questions?
Actually, hold on. I have a question. Is this where I would move something from the consent agenda to the regular discussion?
This is where that, yes.
It can happen here.
Could we move the Spring Hill Sports Live contract to discussion? I have questions on it.
Okay.
And it will not be an action item.
Can we still ask questions when it's in the consent agenda?
It can still be next.
Yeah, you can still, we'll, before we vote on the consent agenda, we'll open it up for questions and comments.
Okay,
There.
never mind then.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Milius?
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming in and being here to discuss the business of the district. I appreciate that. Moving on to mission and vision. This is something we read at every meeting so that we can keep that in the forefront as we work through our agenda. Our vision is to maintain small town values and empower each student to achieve world-class success. And our mission is to be a school district that engages students to learn, create, adapt, and succeed in an ever-changing world. Moving on to business with individuals.
No cards were presented.
Okay, thank you. Organizational items, Dr. Luttrell.
Yeah. Yes, this is the annual meeting where the board approves a lot of their organizational items, such as who they're going to do business with, what board representatives are going to be assigned to which task. And this is an annual thing. It is pretty lengthy, but most of the items are done on an annual basis with very little change. I did want to highlight most of the information there is the same as was in place this past fiscal year. If you will notice on item 6.10, an appointment of the Board of Education clerk this past year. Candace Kramer served as the Board of Education clerk with Mrs. Rachel Henderson serving as the deputy clerk. This organization approval would designate kind of a reversal of roles, and you would have Mrs. Rachel Henderson going and serving as the Board of Education clerk with Mrs. Candace Kramer transitioning into her former role of the deputy clerk. Also, we would need to make sure that on 6.20, which that's the approval of a board member to be assigned to the KASB Governmental Relations Network, mainly, typically be involved with the legislation when they have the convention and November, they basically, have a voting assembly there where delegates, that person would kind of be the one that would be designated to voice, our voice at that. In the past. We just want to make sure that the individual, because I know that in the past, the board president, which is President Updike, has held that. And if that's something that will be continued, we'd want to, or if that was something that was not going to be, we would want to definitely know that. And then on 6.26 is the appointment of, we have a liaison that is appointed to the Spring Hill Recreation Commission. And in the past, that has been said, Director Sealing. And so if there were any changes in that, we would want to be aware of that at this time if possible, even though these can be, changed throughout as needed. And then we have on 6.31, again, this is no change, but we are required to put a lot of notices for various things, according to statute, that in a publication of record. And our choices have been, the past few years have been either go with the Miami County Republic or the Kansas City Star. And due to cost with that, the Miami County Republic has been the one recommended and approved and designated as the paper of record for the district. And then we also have in 6.33, which is our pay for substitute teachers, so forth. In that one there, the text in black essentially is what we currently have in place. And the purple there, our suggested action is that we increase by $5 a day our full-time sub-certificated assignment from $145 to $150 a day, which is a $5 increase for that. Everything else also would remain at, for the long term, would remain at $185 a day. And also was asked to approve a change in our bonus structure so that 10 certified full-time days of sub would earn an additional $50 bonus as an incentive for individuals to choose USD230 as a place where they would like to bring their services. And then after that, the other one I want to draw comment to would be 6.35. And this is the one for the site council approval. And in prior years, each board member has had one or sometimes maybe two different schools that they have chosen to serve on the site council, which typically meets around once a quarter throughout the school year, if you're able to attend. And I do know that, because of our election this year being in November, and there will be some, transitioning on the board, some of that will probably even have to change as we get into January. And as I said, these are not binding for the full year if circumstances dictate, but we would need to have, if possible tonight, I know last year, you all typically take time and just kind of designate or choose assignments, or maybe you choose to stay, but we'd like to have kind of an idea as to which particular school locations you would like to have. There would be a total of 11 if you count the virtual school, which is the Insight School. That would bring it to 11. Otherwise, we have 10 school attendance centers that we would have. So if you all would want to kind of work that out among yourselves and speak up, we can take care of this. Would be the largest task to try to accomplish in this organization.
Okay, Nicole, do you have preferences?
Are we going one by one, or should we,
Just so if you shout out your preferences and then we can
of
see what's
any of
left.
these, or just site council, or?
Site council.
Oh, that's where we're going. Okay. Yes, I would love to stay at the high school. I feel like there's a lot of great things happening there, and I'd love to see where it's going. I've sat on 3 site councils for the last I don't know, since I've been on this board. I don't know if I still need to do that. I'm happy to do
No.
it.
Mm-mm. I don't think it's necessary.
I would love to see Sharon or myself go to Forest Spring so they have a little consistency since it's their first year. I'm not particular if one way or the other. I mean, but that's just my opinion if you don't think so.
Do you have a preference of going to Forest Spring and the high school, or do you have another school that you'd like to be on?
I'll stay at the high school and then whatever other one you guys want me to be at. And if, yeah, I just feel like if you or I could be at Forest Spring so they'd have consistency with the same person, that could be great for their first year.
Nels?
I would stick with the Early Learning Academy again this year.
Okay.
This fall.
Sharon?
I would probably prefer Spring Hill Elementary and Spring Hill Middle School. Be willing to do both of those.
So Nicole, that would put you at Forest Spring.
Okay.
Sounds great to me.
Okay. And I would happy to be Insight and Woodland Spring Middle School. So do we need to just assign from now on out?
You could either assign or
The rest of
Either
people
way.
in the meeting.
Are there people on Zoom?
Hey, President Updike, I'm here. I made it in finally.
Hey, Brent.
Yes,
I'm here
I
too.
current-
I've been here as well.
I currently have Woodland Springs, and I can stay there, or I can move, and I could also take a second if necessary.
Okay, I just took Woodland Spring, but
That's
So-
fine.
okay. So there's Prairie Creek
So I'm
Elementary
here as
School.
well. I
Okay,
am
thank you.
happy to do any of them. I'm happy to wherever you need me to fill in. I'm happy to be any of those. The only request I have or only requirement, I can't do anything that is outside of or that's inside of work hours. So I either need to do one that's at 7 a.m. or something that's in the evening.
Do we know when?
I think the high school is the only one during the day is
It's early. It used to do it
Yes.
7.
7:15.
So work
I could-
hours, hold just a second, Brent. So Ally, when you talk about, I think I heard you say, you're kind of breaking up, but I think I heard you say you needed to have the site councils outside of work hours. How do you define work hours?
I can't do anything before 5 o'clock. So I can do anything in the morning, or I can do anything after 5 o'clock.
After 5.
I think high school's only one in the morning and there's none after 5, so. Okay, Brent?
I can do Spring Hill Elementary and another school if necessary.
So we've got Prairie Creek Elementary. Let me see, Prairie Creek Elementary, Wolf Creek Elementary, Timber Sage Elementary, Dayton Creek Elementary. Those are the ones that are,
If he wants to do Spring Hill Elementary and take Dayton Creek,
okay. So you've got Spring Hill Elementary, Brent, and if you could sign up for another one.
Wolf Creek's fine. I could do
Okay.
Wolf Creek and Spring Hill Elementary.
then we got Prairie Creek and Timber Sage. They might not even know what time they're meeting yet, really.
Timber Sage is typically at 3:45, I believe, or 4:15, something like that. I'm not sure about Prairie Creek. I haven't been on theirs, but And with new principals, this all might be changing,
Yeah.
obviously. I'm happy to take a third one, either of those.
I'd say to go ahead and give Ally and Keith the other two, and then if the time doesn't work out, we can try and switch around. Does that sound okay?
Sounds reasonable. And then so Ally would have Prairie Creek and Keith would have Timber Sage.
Does that sound okay, Ally?
They're not going to be in a time.
Yeah,
we
just
can-
as long as it's either before 8 a.m. or after 5.
So when you get the notification from the school, because I don't think it's probably been determined yet with the two new principals there. If it's not a time that you can make it, then we can trade around or
Yeah.
if we have to. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to help wherever needed.
Yeah, and I don't know how we determine the attendance or whatever, if people are there, but if our board members aren't able to make it, are we able to have one of us fill in? I just feel like with the elementary schools and all these new principals, it could be really crucial to have one of us at those site council meetings this year.
It's something we'd have to work out amongst ourselves, I think. I don't know if we can schedule it, but we just have to let folks know if we can't make it. Was there anything else?
Those are the main things. So I mean, I think we're ready to, since we've got this.
There's some other names in there that we just kind of skipped over though.
Right.
We need to do
Well,
anything with all those or?
Let's walk through each one of them. 6.01, resolution to establish home rule by Board of Education. That is, that's generally accepted. I don't see, are there any questions on that? 6.02, resolution to waive certain accounting requirements. Doug, can you give us a short rendition of why we would waive annual general accepted accounting requirements?
It makes my life easier as well as the staff, and it saves the board a lot of money in auditing costs. It makes the budgeting process go much smoother. And most districts opt out, so this isn't something unique to Spring Hill.
Isn't that due to the way that money comes in and the timing and all? that?
Yeah, it just simplifies things greatly.
And we're still audited
Yes.
Oh, yes, yeah.
several times, and so it's not eliminating key component. Rescinding policies, there's no change there. Adoption of new policies, no change there. And if you want me to stop and slow down, let me know. Approval of resolution for non-discrimination, no change there. Approval activity for fund resolution, no change in that. USD230 treasurer, we would, the recommendation is to appoint, where am I looking? I'm going to say Mr. Doug Schwinn, approve Doug Schwinn as the district treasurer. I think it makes sense. Deposit of school funds, use the State Bank of Spring Hill, no change there. Investment of idle funds, Dr. Luttrell, Dr. Robinson, and Doug Schwinn to be appointed to manage the investment program and through the State Bank of Spring Hill. The change there is just the names that we've had in turnover in those significant roles. A designation of board clerk, I think you walk through that. We want to appoint or designate Rachel Henderson as the board clerk, designation of the deputy board of education clerk. We would appoint Candace Kramer. And thank you, Rachel, for agreeing to step into that position, and Candy for the mentorship you have provided and you will continue to provide. School lunch program, breakfast program, to authorize JC Dalton to be empowered to enter into an agreement with Kansas Department of Education as necessary. Federally funded programs to appoint or authorize Dr. Robinson to represent the administration. Kansas Public Employees Retirement System representatives to appoint Dr. Luttrell, Doug Schwinn, and Nancy Miller to represent the Board of Education. Acts of truancy, authorize all administrators to report cases of truancy. Appointment of legal counsel. Would be to authorize Greg Goheen of MVP Law as our legal counsel. Appointment of the auditor is to authorize Gordon CPA as the district's auditor. Our authorization is to adopt the 1,116-hour calendar. Free and reduced meal application appeals to appoint Dr. Robinson as the hearing officer. Appoint the Kansas Association of School Boards Governmental Relations Network representative. I'm happy to do that again. I know the Kansas Association of School Boards conference is in November of this year. Title IX, Section 504 is to designate Dr. Robinson as the district coordinator. And the Board of Education shall also designate Cindy Jados as the district coordinator. And also provide Cindy Jados authorization to act on the district's behalf in seeking full compliance. Destruction of old records, authorized Doug Schwinn, our business director, and the clerk of the board, Rachel Henderson, to review old records in storage for destruction per Kansas statute. Freedom of Information Officer and custodian of records is to appoint board clerk Rachel Henderson as the custodian and deputy clerk Candy Kramer as the Freedom of Information Officer. Also appoint Cindy Jados as a coordinator for homeless children. Appointment of liaison for the Insight School is to appoint myself as liaison for Insight School of Kansas Career Prep Program Advisory Committee. Appointment of liaison for Spring Hill Rec Commission is to appoint Allie Sealing. Do you want to do that again, Allie?
Sorry, am I off mute?
You are now.
Okay, yes, I'm happy to continue doing that. When I had talked with Brian Peel, he had let me know that they didn't prefer a board member to attend every meeting, that he would let us know when we were needed and what information we needed.
Okay.
I'm happy to be that contact.
Okay. Appointment Board of Education negotiation team. I will step down from that. Currently, that is myself and Sharon Mitchell. I will step down from that for the 23-24 negotiation cycle. We do need, will you stay on that, Sharon? Or will you?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Sharon, we need one more.
Do we need to decide that now, or can we wait till we get our new board, or do we have to
That
decide?
would be up to the pleasure of you all to decide.
Do we want to do it now? I mean,
Well, most of these we're going to have to go back through in January and reevaluate. Like, is that typical? Do we do that every January?
No, we don't.
They just-
No, we don't. But I've been sitting here making a list of those items that Rachel is going to have to pull back up for that January meeting that we have to reappoint.
this is relatively new because of the election cycle
Yeah, it's
change.
one of the casualties of moving the election.
Yeah.
cycle.
So the elections used to be in what, March
April.
or April, and new boards were
Seated in July.
seated in this meeting in
This was the
July.
first meeting.
So
Yeah.
this is, it's when they moved it to January, it threw
Yeah.
off. It doesn't match the,
Upsets.
This will have to be an action item or discussion item that first meeting in January. So
so we can table it until then. We can table the
Changing you?
negotiation team.
changing you.
Sharon, yes. Well, no. Well, yeah, I guess it would be for me.
I
We
would
just wouldn't take action on this today.
Or
Or
I guess
just
we
leave it
could,
the same.
we could leave it the same. and
I'd
then
leave it the
change
same and then when we get our new board, it will be a discussion item into an action item for that board to discuss. Basically, we have to go back through the organizational meeting again. Your
Okay.
job.
Fair enough. Authorization of early payment of claims is to adopt the early payment request policy from KSA 12-105B. Petty cash limits, there's no change to these. Reimbursement for mileage incurred by employees. It's the current, the established state of Kansas reimbursement rate for mileage allowable. It's currently 65.5 cents per mile. Selection of office district newspaper. The board's asked to establish Miami County Public as the official district newspaper. No change there. Disposable of excess or unused district-owned equipment and supplies is authorized the Director of Business, Director of Technology, and the Director of Facilities as directed by the superintendent to dispose of excess or unusable district-owned equipment and supplies. Substitute teacher pay to increase that from $145 to $150, as well as increase $145 per day for registered nurse subs to $185 per day in order to attract more RNs to sub for our district. Dr. Link talked about the $50 bonus as well. Wellness Committee Coordinator, we're asked to appoint Michelle Hackney as the coordinator for the Wellness Committee. Site councils we've gone through. Board meeting calendar is.
Did Rachel get did you get all the site council people? Okay.
Okay. Do you want to, can you review those real quick? Rachel?
Yep. I have Nicole Milius at Forest Spring and Spring Hill High School. Sharon Mitchell at Spring Hill Middle School and Dayton Creek Elementary School. Doug Updike at Insight and Woodland Spring Middle School. Nels Anderson at Sheila. Allie Sealing at Prairie Creek Elementary School. Brent Hoffman at Spring Hill Elementary School and Wolf Creek Elementary School. And Keith at Timber Sage Elementary School.
Very good. Okay, any further comments, questions, or discussion on the organizational items? We do need to.
Is this an action item,
Yeah.
I guess?
Yeah, we need to vote on.
Okay. Mr. President, I move we approve the organizational items as discussed and agreed.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to accept the organizational items as just previously read. Any further comment or discussion? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
approved.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda, which consists of approval of the consent agenda items, approval of the minutes from the June 26th regularly stated Board of Education meeting, the treasurer's report, payroll and claims, the clerk's report, personnel, Insight student handbook updates, Spring Hill Sports Live contract, and the acceptable use policy. Any questions or discussion, comments?
Yes, I
I
have
got
some
a-
questions.
Go ahead, Nicole.
You go ahead first.
I have a quick question for Doug Schwinn. Under payment and claims, we had a very large rebate payment to for extraordinary growth, and I wondered if you could just speak about that for a minute.
You referring to the $4.4 million we sent back to the state?
Yes, I just refreshed my memory on how that works and why we did that.
Yeah, great question. The way it works is we tell the state up front what we're going to levy, and we gather those tax dollars throughout the budget year. But at the same time, the state is paying us for that money in state aid for when they pay us our general state aid payments on a monthly basis. So essentially, we're getting paid twice. And so our job is to take the tax dollars we collected and reimburse the state since they've already paid us all that money too. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Thank you. I just don't remember seeing that before and needed to understand how it works.
Yeah, the advantage of doing it that way is, as you know, most of our tax money comes in January and then in June. So by getting it paid monthly throughout the year, we don't have to wait on those tax dollars to show up to be able to spend it. The state's giving us our money steady throughout the year. And then we just have to reimburse them at the end.
Got it. Oh, that's something they've finally got right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it works pretty good. Yep.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Doug.
Yep.
Any
Okay.
questions?
Yep, I have a question about Spring Hill Sports Live. I see BJ's here, so thank you for being here, because I asked this question last year. The kind of discrepancy between girls and boys sports, if you take out basketball and wrestling, I'm guessing wrestling is girls and boys, and you just look at the women's and men's, girls and boys sports, it's 14 games for boys and 7 games you air for girls.
I don't take out the girls basketball, but we certainly count the girls basketball broadcasts we do.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, if you take out those figures,
So
'cause those
a
are,
lot that goes into the schedules for what it's worth. Some of it's availability of space or coverage. Some of it could be whether or not those sports have been covered on other channels. So if you look across our network, oftentimes you'll see a Spring Hill girls soccer game on a Lewisburg Sports Live channel. It's one of the benefits of being a part of our network. So we have 5 schools in this area. So if you look across, and that's one of the reasons I outlined the 7 additional games. Across those 7 additional games that we did across our network, you're going to find a few more girls sports that are covered, including girls soccer. We did, in fact, girls wrestling was a specific wrestling match just for girls. We covered the girls wrestling tournament. We strive to try to have equity across those broadcasts. We try to make sure that everybody's getting as much love as possible. Certainly softball got more coverage than baseball, for instance, into sports. Again, there's just a ton that goes into whether or not a broadcast can be executed, whether that's availability of the broadcaster to cover those games, weather. It could be a lot of things that go into that. Honestly, if you tell me that, I feel like that's a pretty good split right now as we continue to add girls sports and try to find more coverage of soccer or those other opportunities. So,
you think that twice as many boys sports
well,
as girls?
I mean, I look at it differently across the full gamut of our broadcast coverage. So if there's 40 broadcasts, there's 24 of those that include female sports. That's actually more than half. On some of those shoulder sports, you're looking at specifically that flex schedule where we go pick up baseball, softball, girls soccer, boys soccer. That's really just an 11 broadcast schedule that we do. And we try to make that, if you look at that, just those 11 broadcasts, you're going to find more than half of those are going to be female sports. 3 softball. I don't have that directly in front of me. We certainly cover more girls soccer than we do boys soccer. We cover more softball than we do baseball. Those are places where we try to find those. We cover volleyball as much as available as well. So, year in and year out, those are going to fluctuate depending on what our broadcast schedule is available to us. And so we certainly strive for it. It's one of our goals. That's one of the goals that was set forth by this board when we first got the contract, and we continue to work towards that. And I feel like we're doing a pretty good job considering, scheduling and everything else that I've just outlined.
So I have a
Can I
question.
ask a follow-up question to that too? I'm sorry, Nicole. I didn't mean to step on you.
Hold on one second, Ally.
Okay.
If you had a parent that wanted to, or a business, sponsor one specific sport and say, we'll pay for all these broadcasts for this specific sport, have you had that? Is that an option?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm open to all kinds of things.
Okay.
Certainly, the way we've set this whole thing up has been based on the 40 broadcast schedule with the 11 flex and then covering those primary sports.
Yeah.
You also have to keep in mind this is an advertising driven thing. The reason we're able to offer this at absolutely no cost to the district or anybody else is because we have businesses who say we want to advertise on your platform. We need to deliver them viewership. We need to deliver them the best product possible. So when we go to look at a schedule and we're looking at a softball game, we're going to go where we can broadcast that effectively. That may not be here because we have had troubles with that here. So that's limited some of those broadcast opportunities. So when we're always open to that. If somebody said, yeah, we want to cover all baseball and we're going to pay this much, let's go. We'll find people to broadcast them too. That's one of the challenges. We have to have people available to do those at the level that we want done.
Sure. So currently when someone comes to you to sponsor, they're just like, hey, I want my name on the broadcast. They don't specify sports or time.
They buy the package and that we produce, which is that 40 broadcast schedule.
Okay, gotcha.
So we present them with that broadcast schedule. They buy those 40 broadcasts. We go produce those 40 broadcasts. We've not expanded that. One, in that we have to do what the market can hold. So can businesses afford another 10 games, 20 games? Maybe some businesses could. That's just the broadcast package that we've developed that we've implemented at the other 9 schools we work with.
Gotcha. And I just say that I'd love to challenge you. Kansas City's doing some great things with women's sports. I mean, we are setting world standards right now, and I'd love for our district and Spring Hill Sports Live and your business to do the same. So I do want to see that kind of come even. And it looks like the biggest disparity, honestly, is between football and volleyball. Football is probably the easiest to broadcast, right? You already have all of that.
Well, not easiest, but it's certainly, I mean, if you go look at just viewership from an advertising standpoint, if you put the hat of all the people who support our channel, football's where it's at. I mean, that's where they're going to get the most viewers on a Friday night. It's just statistically proven across our network every Friday night. So certainly you're going to have those 9 to 10 football games. Those are going to be only boys primarily. Obviously, females can play that sport,
but you can't say that for sure. There's not data here to support that. And when you send out a package, they buy all of it. So you don't have someone saying, so that's not really.
And that's why we sell it as a package like that. And that's why we put it to groups. So over the course of a year, you're going to get, those big games where it's whatever, Spring Hill and DeSoto, where we're going to have, 5,000 people watching. And then we're going to have some games where it's going to be softball, where it may only be a couple hundred. Throughout the whole year, you get a good value for your 40 broadcasts. That's kind of how we approach it. So I certainly hear what you're saying. This board, when we brought this contract to us, which is the first time I ever had to do that for a school board, brought that up as far as equity, and we have worked on it. It's something I think about every time we put together those schedules. Whether we're going to do girls softball, soccer, and boys soccer, we do more girls and boys. That's just the way we've done it every time. So
Sure. Awesome.
I would, if I could, I would just say thank you to the school district for the opportunity to broadcast. It's really been awesome. Thank you to Clay Freegon and Mr. Williams for being so supportive. We can kind of bring in a circus when we show up to do these things, and they're always really accommodating to us as well as our other networks channels that come in to the district. And so it's just been really awesome to work with you guys, and I'm hopeful we can continue to do it for a long, long time.
Glad to hear it.
Well, thank you. I actually love it. I love that we were able to give this to people.
Allie, do you still?
This is Allie. Yeah. So first, I just wanted to say, VJ, thank you. I do think it's pretty amazing to be able to watch our sports from anywhere. I know there's many extended family members across the nation that are extremely grateful for this service. So I first wanted to say thank you. With that, I'm curious what you just mentioned as far as like for Lewisburg is in our market. And so maybe some of the broadcasts are through Lewisburg so it's Lewisburg Sports Live. Is that published somewhere? Is there maybe that's a question for Clay or someone else too? Is there a way to make sure that we are getting that information out to everyone? So maybe if they do have a volleyball player who's playing Lewisburg, they might not realize that they could tune into the Lewisburg channel.
Yep. That's certainly something we focused on last year as we started to grow a little bit bigger. VarsitySportsLive.com is the website that we've kind of got everything coming back to one single location. So actually on a Friday night, you could go to VarsitySportsLive.com and watch 9 high school broadcasts at one time. And so we're really trying to drive people back to that. I did start to the athletic directors every week. If BJ's on his game, get sent the links for the week. And I've started including those additional broadcasts covered. Right? I do send that to you. So if Lewisburg's, it's on Lewisburg Sports Live. Where this comes in handy, for instance, is during tournament week in basketball, the girls and boys split. So the girls are playing at a girls tournament. The boys are playing at Lewisburg in a single boys game. Well, we can cover Spring Hill on Lewisburg Sports Live. So Spring Hill's getting a basketball game that they never would have otherwise gotten. And that we do that multiple times a year across all 5 of those channels. And the more we get in this area, the more you're going to start to see your team get covered. This is my pitch to other schools. And so yeah, we're working on that. In fact, I've got the possibility of a possible full-time hire coming to work for us as well, which is new to us. And their job is to make sure that everybody knows what's happening every night on our network. So.
And so honestly, I think that, and maybe Christopher is doing this and it's just not coming up in my specific social feeds, but we should be pushing that out from the school district too, just the links, the days of, and even if it's a link to Lewisburg, if it's our kids playing in that. So I think that there's definitely room there that we can help with. My second question was, I think you've already kind of answered it, but just to make sure I understand, as I have had a lot of, over the last year, parents ask about this. They're always asking about equity. So not just between boys and girls, but across sports. But I believe what you just said is that when an advertiser is offered a package, they don't get to choose which sport. It's just spread across all of the sports. So they can't decide they just want to be basketball. Is that correct?
Correct. And the reason we do that, and this could come back to bite me, I'm just going to tell you, if we said you get to pick your sport, we would sell 90% of our advertising in football season, and we would not have any we wouldn't have as many advertisers as we would across some of those other ones, just because they know that's where the viewership is at, which is, you can watch it on the broadcast and you can see that viewership. I wanted to be able to cover as many types of sports as possible. So we kind of anchor it with those key sports, football and basketball, with 29 broadcasts right there. Those are just turn on your TV anytime. Those are the sports you're going to see broadcast. Those are what people tend to watch. But I wanted to be able to do additional sports on top of that. What I'm hearing a little bit and what I can see happening is just an expansion of those flex schedule sports, where we instead present a 50-game schedule instead of a 40-game schedule. We're in the midst of selling right now, so that may be something we have to add en route, and could look at some of those sport-specific packages. But again, that's just not been our model so far. So right now, what we're discussing is outside of what we've typically done. But we are definitely open to doing 100%.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is just hopefully a quick question. I know the legislature passed something that kind of opened things up for you guys. How did that change?
Yeah.
Or can you summarize that real?
Yeah, so that's probably the biggest news, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I meant to mention that. And this will, I think, lend itself to some of that. For instance, volleyball is a great example of this. We're in the playoffs every year. We have a chance to go to a state tournament almost every year, but we've been stopped after the regular season from going to cover them in the postseason. Whether they're playing at another venue or even in our venue, it's going to be prohibitive for us to cover them because of the costs associated with it, and also the NFHS agreement that was kind of prohibiting any postseason coverage. So myself and led by a gentleman who's in charge of the Kansas Association of Broadcasters as well, went and testified and ran a bill to basically get rid of the prohibition of us covering our teams into the playoffs, and prohibits the NFHS contract from superseding ours. So when you guys execute this contract today, it gives us the right to cover our teams into the playoffs without any expense. That was my little addition to the bill, and without any prohibition. So they can't keep us from going to these other venues to cover our teams. And I'm sure this will be some contention with Acacia as we move forward, because it's new, but that should include state tournaments and state championships as well. And so my hope is that we can go cover our teams at the basketball state tournament. I mean, that's where broadcasters like me get paid off to be, sitting in the cold in the outfield at the softball game, is our opportunity to go cover our teams at a state tournament. And we haven't been able to do that for about 5 years now. And so that's coming back, hopefully. We had good legislative help locally as well. Senator Baumgartner helped run that bill from the education department chair. So that helped a lot.
Good. Anything else? Any other questions?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I move we approve the minutes from the June 26, 2023 meeting, treasurer's report, payroll and claims, clerk's report, personnel, insight, student handbook 2324, sports live, Spring Hill Sports Live contract, and acceptable use policy.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as read. Any final comments or questions? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
approved.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to good news, recognitions and announcements. Dr. Luttrell.
Yeah, yes, the only announcement that I have is will be coming up in a couple weeks, and that is just strictly again reminding everyone that our open house for our new Forest Spring Middle School, which is set to open with this upcoming school year, will be held 2 weeks from tomorrow night on Tuesday, August the 8th. At 5:30, we'll have a ribbon cutting and people will be able to come and, take a walk through the building and see that great facility. But that's my announcement. Tuesday, August the 8th. Come see us.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to discussion items. Our first discussion item is the facility usage guidelines.
Yes, last month, we had Kyle and Mr. Delphi, as well as Mr. Freegon, come and present some information on our facility use policy, just to kind of make sure everyone was familiar with our protocols and procedures. And at that time, it was also pointed out that perhaps we could make the overall document a little bit more streamlined. And so we've, Mr. Delphi has spent a lot of time working on that, and he's here. Thought we'd bring it back tonight. And again, not ask for approval, but just again, ask for your input and as we tell you what our latest updates are. And we would like to hopefully, like I said, bring this back some point near so that we can get it formally approved once again as the guidelines we're going to use for our facility use. Mr. Delphi.
Thanks, Dr. Luttrell. Good evening. Yes, during the last discussion we had facility use, the board made some recommendations on what they'd like to see changed, and we did a few things. And I got to give credit to Dr. Villarreal and his team for making this more organized and putting a cover page on it and table of contents and some other things. So appreciate that. First, you'll see the cover page there, guide to facility use. And then we added a table of contents. So for better organization, easier to find things throughout the document. We cleaned up a lot of the verbiage throughout the document. And basically everything's pretty much the same with a few changes. And like I said, the verbiage, but we did add a change. I'm getting to it here. So under facility use fee category, under category C, we added another bullet point that says exceptions will be made for Spring Hill High School coaches to use Spring Hill High School athletic areas for summer camps that involve Spring Hill School students. We added that because the coaches during summer get paid by the parents directly. And so because of this, we've made this exception in category C because that's where it fits in the thing. So that's one of the changes we made. And then another change we made under facility use fee categories, rather than listing out every school like Dayton Creek Elementary School cafeteria, Timber Sage Elementary School cafeteria, we just condensed that and put elementary school cafeterias all in one line item. So, and that is all the changes we made. So I'd open it up for questions and or comments or things you'd like to see changed.
Looks good. Good summary at the end.
Any other questions or comments?
I have some questions. First of all, this looks great. This is so much better than what the other, the past looked like. And it's pretty concise. I have heard a lot of questions and I've had a lot of inquiries about who and how and when and all of that. in the last, I don't know, 6 months probably. I've worked a lot with Dr. Robinson to pass those people on to him. But so to be fair, I sent this to all of those people and said, hey, let me know what your feedback is. So here's some of the questions. And I felt like this was a really great time for them to hear what category they fall in and if they would be able to utilize the fields and the facilities as they after reading this feel like they fit in. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and then along with then the rec actually went through this and asked quite a few questions. So on page 4, there's a line on letter C at the bottom. There's a comment that says adequate adult supervision to satisfy fire and safety regulations. Is that written somewhere? So, or is it in the lease when someone leases? So they're aware what that is.
And you said page 4, I'm sorry.
Page 4 at the very bottom, it says C, and it's the very last line on the page. Yeah, adequate. They're required to provide proof of adequate adult supervision to satisfy fire and safety regulations.
I honestly couldn't tell you if that's in the lease. I'd have to go back and look and see. And
Okay. I think
I'll
that was a
look at
question. They said, what is it? And I assumed that they would be notified when they were releasing what that looked like. On page 5, where it references in part 2, it says, it's like the third line, it says Spring Hill District Youth Activities. Is this all of our youth activities that happen in the district? Is this pertaining directly to the rec activities? Is this all
This, I
district?
believe, and we can be a little more specific on that, but this is for school district, Spring Hill School District activities.
Gotcha. So
Not
not the rec
rec.
and not any outside. It's purely just our district.
Yes.
Okay. Like I said, I sent a lot of this and let's see, we talked about that. Okay, so on page 6, letter M, sports camps must be approved. So the rec it's saying like making sure that this conforms to all CASHA regulations. And the
Yes.
rec was concerned because they said, well, what does that mean for anyone that's not a district activity? Are there other regulations they follow? Is there something that pertains to them in there?
I think it's just pertaining to the school district sports activities and none other.
On page 7, I know I feel like I'm picking this apart, but I feel like this has affected a lot of people. So I want to make sure that we address all this now. On page 7, letter A, where it says weekend and holiday usage requires 2-hour minimum, blah, blah, blah. What does holiday mean? Is that anytime school's out? Is that an actual holiday like Christmas, Thanksgiving? What does holiday mean?
It would be any holiday that students aren't in and staff is not here. So Martin Luther King days. So some of those days is what it's.
So it would be like during Thanksgiving, that week before Thanksgiving, where all the students are out and teachers are out. So that whole week would then be a holiday week.
That's correct.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. So on page 8, letter A, it says I think there's been discussion in regards to some upgrades at different facilities. I think they wondered if this was related to that, if
And you're speaking of placement of building structures or equipment?
I think more like upgrades to shared facilities that we have with the rec. More the early education center baseball fields.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm looking to see if I had more notes on it. I think that's, they're wondering if that's also, if this would limit them from making upgrades, or if they can go outside of that and still upgrade that.
Well, they do need to run everything by us. Any upgrades they do, and full disclosure, that's something we're looking at. I will be later looking at maybe a contract or something with them to kind of
Perfect.
go further into some of these
Perfect.
details that they're asking. So, but yeah, that's what that.
Perfect. Okay, so this is where it gets a little inconsistent. So all of the, first under gymnasiums, page 10, letter F, it says no food and drink can be consumed in the gymnasium. So currently after prom and daffodil days, and there might be other events, they have events in those gymnasiums and there's food served in there.
Mhm.
Will they no longer be able to do that? Are there restrictions? Is that something currently that's in place?
It is. I think this is some stipulation we make for all renters. And I think we're going on good faith that the people running our own district events are going to manage that well. It's something when we have somebody rent a facility, we can't, manage that as well as we could when we have our own district employees doing it.
Sure.
So that's something I can look at possibly changing. I do see the inconsistency you see there. So,
Yeah. Okay. So then all of these say the Spring Hill High School facilities are only available to school related events, like all of the starting pretty far back, that the high school facilities are only available to school related events. Can you tell me on page 11, it says baseball and softball fields. Are there any other fields that aren't the high school fields? Is that related to all the elementary schools?
that is
Well.
not, no.
Oh, so if we're not
So-
renting out our high school facilities, our high school baseball and softball facilities, are there any other facilities to rent? I think that's my question.
There is, yes. Middle schools can be rented out.
Oh,
There's a baseball field at Prairie Creek that could be rented out.
so the elementary ones.
Elementary, middle school, everything's open to be rented with exception to the high school. And it's because we put so much money in there and we have turf fields that
Sure.
we're excluding outside use of those to try to preserve them as long as possible.
Sure. So, so I think that the next piece that people are asking about is what category they fall in and how to determine what category they fall in. Because we get a little, it says non-school related camps in which Spring Hill High School District coaches are privately compensated fall into category C.
Mhm.
And everywhere in here, I mean, obviously this exception is made for the coaches. So I
Yes.
think that that's been a point of contention with everybody that I've spoke with. They've pointed it out each time. And what does that mean and where does that go? It kind of aligns with the category B, where it says summer athletic and cheerleading clinics as allowed by CASHA.
To be.
Sorry, we're all on page, all this is on page 15. I just assumed you guys had my notes. Come on.
So what's your question exactly? I'm sorry.
So that's okay. I think where it goes is people are wondering what category they fall in. So like category C, if non-related camps to Spring Hill district coaches are privately compensated fall into category C, and you go to this facilities use, none of the high school facilities are available in category C.
Yes, that's correct.
So then those coaches wouldn't be able to
Well,
utilize.
that's why I put the exception in. Exceptions will be made for Spring Hill High School coaches to use Spring Hill High School athletic areas for summer camps that involve Spring Hill school students. And we did that just because we understand that the coaches do fall under category C, and it would exclude basically anybody under category C, D, or E would not be able to use the high school. So we put that, since the coaches kind of fit in that category C, we put that exception in there so they could still run their summer camps for that.
But it's only what if a middle school coach wanted to utilize those facilities?
They
Then,
should use the middle school.
and what is the charge then to the coach?
You remember what?
Off the top of my head, I think it was $20 an hour.
Okay.
And I think we went with just a flat fee for $20. So all coaches were charged that regardless of what different areas they were using. It was just going to be a $20 an hour charge for their camps per hour.
And we hope that most of those kids coming to those camps are Spring Hill kids.
According to CASA regulations, they have to be Spring Hill kids. For our high school students, for youth kids, it gets a little bit where potentially you could have other kids coming in, but for all CASA, for high school camps, they have to be enrolled or working on their enrollment, like pre-enrollment, in order to participate.
So I have a question about that. So when there are youth camps in the summer, any kind of youth camps at our high school, we are checking enrollment then? And how is that? So how is that happening? I mean, especially, is enrollment now going to go through the school district?
And I don't believe we are checking enrollment for elementary kids for a summer camp. No.
How is enrollment going to happen going forward for the camps also?
Is it, wait a minute. We're talking about enrollment for summer camps, and the conversation is around the district use, facilities use.
Yeah.
I feel like we're getting off track here a
Thank
little
you.
bit.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you. I'm wondering with facility use, that's the question that we're receiving. I'm sure Nicole's receiving the same questions that I am on who can use the facility specifically in the summer. And if we're going by CASA regulations that it has to be people enrolled, then how are we? I didn't know how we were monitoring that. And when people are asking us questions about if they can use the facility, I want to be sure that we can answer directly.
And just to add to that, part of the policy states that the kids have to, 50% or more of the kids have to be Spring Hill students. So I think that's where our question is coming from related to the policy.
And if we're talking about elementary camps, we only we send out information to our school kids. It's not like we're actively trying to send out information to kids that are in other school districts and that sort of thing. So I feel like we have a good hold on that one. As far as high school, we do have, I have coaches asking me a lot as far as, hey, I got a new kid. Well, then I go and check that and make sure, oh yeah, they've started their enrollment or they've already started their enrollment or where we're at in that process. And so we do our due diligence in that as far as looking at the enrollment numbers.
So I just in that category C, if coaches are in this, it says additional charges for custodial and other personnel will be assessed. The hard part is it's hard to follow since we're giving that exception to our coaches.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to follow what the charge is. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Because typically category C would not have access to our high school fields. So I think that maybe in addition to that piece or whatever that looks like for you guys.
Yeah, so what we can do is just add in the facility fee category, we can add a section in there for that particular item.
Sure. So category D,
Yeah.
the question came up, alumni events. Does that fall into category D?
Alumni events.
So what do you mean by an alumni event?
Do we host reunions here? Alumni soccer games, alumni basketball games, alumni football games?
I can't tell you if we do or not.
I guess with we don't have any like formalized alumni games that we.
There was one on Facebook and it was a formal thing out there. So I think that needs to be addressed.
For-
I think
for
maybe
what's-
what you're talking about is when the alumni can come back and scrimmage against the current players.
Or just an alumni game.
What
I would
was
just-
what was it though? What sport?
It was football.
Football.
They're not.
They were scrimmaging.
Were
I
they?
think they were scrimmaging against the current players,
The current players, and so
but the alumni can come back and scrimmage against the current players. It's kind of a fun thing.
Yeah,
I don't-
just-
Absolutely. I think all
yeah.
of this is fun. I think the hardest part we're having, guys, and why so many people had comments on this is that the inconsistencies of who's allowed to utilize our fields and who's not. So if we make all of these exceptions, but our taxpayers who are paying for these facilities aren't allowed to use them, that's where people get really frustrated. So I hate to keep going through this, but these are the questions that were asked, and not just by our taxpayers, but even by our rec, multiple people from our rec. So I want to make sure we get this right. Because you can ask Dr. Robinson how many people have come to me since February in regards to this. I just want to get it right. I just want it to be really clear and concise. So there's not a lot of gray where people like, you can say, here's the policy. And they're like, cool, this is the category I fall in, and this is where this is, and this is where this is done. But then if they're like, oh, I can't do this because of this, but they see the same category here, and there's not a really clear reason why someone else is using the facility, but they were declined. It's really hard for me to sit there and say, yeah, I know that you also pay the tax dollars and all of that, but you can't use those facilities. I'm sorry. That's a hard thing to say. From
The
my
only
point of-
facilities we're not allowing people to use is the high school, right? Football field, soccer field.
That's
And
correct. And that's what I was gonna
Right, and
ask.
that's the only thing that's good. We have a lot more facilities that are available for use. We need to protect those turf fields, as Mr. Delphia said.
But as we have alumni events, alumni soccer, alumni football, that's not protecting those fields. So if we're going to go with that,
Current students, correct? We don't have alumni from 2020 scrimmaging alumni from 2021. That's when you say alumni events, I think exclusively alumni, right?
I guess, can I chime in just for a second? There's a couple things. I continue to hear about the rec. And I think if that's a spot that we need to sit down and talk further, I'd be happy to set up that with Kylie and with leadership from the rec to be able to work through some of those things. I think the other caution I would have right now is some of the line of questioning, when you talk alumni events and things like that, if they are being scheduled, they're being scheduled to provide opportunities for our current students. And I just want to make sure that we don't make our policy so restrictive that our coaches and our high school can't do what's best for our kids, which I think was the intent of this policy in the first place. And I think the one piece that it does kind of make it difficult, and we've been talking about it before it even came to the board, is the summer payment piece with our coaches. And we can continue to look at that piece. But I almost think, as President Updike mentioned earlier, that it may be two different conversations, that you have a facilities use piece, and we need to have a bigger conversation about our summer camps and how they're operating.
So I think the actionable item, rather than continue down, I think, Nicole, could you share all the comments that you've had with
Yeah, that's when that's what,
everyone, or with the board as well as Dr. Robinson and Kylie, so that we're all looking at the same thing? Right now, I feel like we're not looking at the same thing. So if you could share those, and the actionable item is to provide clarity around this category around these categories. It sounds like there's the confusion comes in with the summer program. I think it's fairly clear until you get to the summer programs. So the actionable item is to provide clarity around those categories. And I think using Ms. Milius's comments that she's received from different people, I think if we throw the windows open and provide transparency through of all of these conversations, because it is feedback and it is input and it's insight from a lot of different perspectives. And I think it's critical that we do consider those. I'm not saying we have to accept every one, but I think we do need to consider those different perspectives, and to have, so that it's very clear, number one, what category you fit into, and number two, what the costs are going to be. And maybe the categories aren't right. I don't know. Maybe it's a summer program and we talk specifically about that, and then it's other things. So that's the actionable item, I think. Any other comments on that? Like, so that we can move forward on it. I think that's the action.
I have a question then, Doug. How would you like us to share those comments? How you're asking for comments from the people that have reached out to us? How would you like for us to do that?
I'd like you to send all of those comments to Rachel, and then Rachel can disseminate those to the board and others that need to be included. Is that good? Okay. All right. Thank you. We appreciate your time. I think it's good to have these conversations and get these different perspectives. Moving on. I lost track of my agenda.
Elevated.
Moving on to consideration of utilizing Elevate to deliver curriculum objectives in areas of need. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, we, at this juncture, we're still in need of at least a science instructor at Spring Hill High School, which across the state is, pretty much quite a shortage everywhere. And there's different strategies, different options a district can choose to try and fill a void in that area. We currently have pursued an option or looked into an option to possibly that would provide that science instruction needed with a certificated teacher using a third-party vendor. Elevate is the name of the company that would do it. It would provide a live teacher via online use, but it would be live that would provide the necessary offerings. And so this evening, like I said, we've got Dr. Robinson and Dr. Smith here to kind of provide you some information. With that, as you know, our school year is upcoming, and 3 weeks from tomorrow will be the first day. And while we definitely do not, I know this is don't normally want to make a decision this evening, but we would need to, if there's interest in pursuing this option as opposed to, a couple other options that are available that we would not feel would be as high quality. We probably would need to later tonight, after later in the meeting, have a decision as to whether you would like to maybe meet again within the next week real quick and decide whether or not you want to pursue that contract. If you do that way, we can for sure could move that along to make sure it's ready to go by the first day of our school year. But Dr. Robinson and Dr. Smith can share a little bit more information about that option.
When you start to say they're 3 weeks away, I think Mr. Williams is probably a little bit nervous over here. I would, before I jump into the conversation about Elevate, I would just put out some thank yous. If you look at our high school, to be sitting right now talking about one open position in the job market the way it is says a lot about what both Mrs. Hackney and Mr. Williams have done in recruiting staff to make sure we're filling positions. I would also say when you look at the proposal that we're bringing tonight, our science team, our counselor team at the high school, our teaching and learning department have all been a part of really looking at what our options are. This is a unique opportunity that we're bringing. When we look today, there were 44 science openings still across the state of Kansas, 24 of those at the high school level. Part of, I think, what appeals to us about this option is I anticipate this won't be the last time that we're standing before you with an opening at the high school level. And yet, as our team has discussed things, we have looked both at quality of instruction being our priority, but also making sure we're not taking away from what our other staff members are already being asked to do or adding more to their plate and risking creating additional openings. And so we considered several things in trying to fill this position. Up until about 2 weeks ago, Mr. Williams and Mrs. Hackney were both still working with a candidate, trying to recruit. If you go online, you'll see the position is still advertised and will continue to be advertised because our intention would be to find a full-time teacher. With that said, I think we have to start planning as if there is not a viable candidate coming in the next 3 weeks and start looking at what do we do for the approximately 140 students that would need these science credits. So what Elevate would offer is a live teacher who would teach over a virtual platform. So this would be live on our schedule. They would be teaching students in real time based on so we don't have to make changes to our bell schedule. Our kids would still be able to stop in the middle of class and ask questions and interact with the teacher. It's just that the instruction would be coming through the screen with either a substitute teacher or classroom aide in the room helping manage and support students. So if you think about this from a college or junior college perspective, where you've got your lead professor and you've got a GA or teacher's assistant in the room, it's a similar model to that. So the advantage here that we saw is, one, it would be a certified teacher in the area of physical science, or in this case, I think it's an integrated science class. So it'd be a certified teacher rather than asking a substitute teacher to take science content and teach it to high school students. The other part is they would do all of the lesson planning and the grading. So again, if we went the route of a substitute teacher or other option, we have to ask one of our other science teachers to take on another prep in providing both the lesson plans for the substitute teacher being the teacher of record at that point. So we avoid a lot of those kind of stressors that may cause us issues down the road. It would also, part of this is making sure that we have a curriculum that aligns with our current curriculum. So one of the advantages to this being in the area of science is the next generation science standards are fairly consistent across the board. But one of the things that Elevate will do as we move forward is work with Dr. Smith and her team just to make sure that any adjustments that we would normally see in our high school curriculum, that they would work with us to make sure that's happening for these students. We looked at several other options that just looking at what our neighbors are doing. We looked at the long-term sub possibility. We looked at several other vendors, everything from Greenbush to other private companies to see what they offer. We discussed utilizing some kind of virtual platform and just knowing the way students learn. That wasn't our top choice. And we also, looking at what our neighbors are doing, some of them are looking at moving middle school teachers up to high school. The trouble with that right now is we've already done some movement of teachers to prepare for spring opening. We also have some licensure issues that for some of them to even make the move to a course like this at the high school, they would have to pass additional praxis exams. So some of that may be something that we can work with our staff for future, but would be really difficult at this time. Dr. Smith, is there anything you want to add about what we know about Elevate?
We did have the opportunity to review their curricula and make sure that it was aligned with our own state and district curriculum. So we feel confident that the objectives of their courses would match with the objectives of our courses at the high school. And they have offered to work with both myself and Kristen on the curriculum throughout the year. So like Dr. Robinson said, if we had any concerns or wanted to make an adjustment, we'd be able to work with that instructor and make those changes to the class.
The other piece I would address just before we open it for questions is if we go down this path and 9 weeks in, we find a science teacher who says, I would love to teach at Spring Hill High School, that's great. We could take, we're still under contract for a full year, but we could take that contract and utilize it for some other things. So we could repurpose it to look at intervention or to look at another elective course that we're not able to offer. So our intention would still be to recruit and hope to find a long-term science candidate. And if that were to happen, then we would sit down as a team and look at what else can we offer our students based on this platform. It may, right now we're using it to fill a hole. There are also offerings that we have discussed with students and families that in the future, if this proved to be a good model for some of those 1 section or 2 section courses until we grow a little bit more, it could prove to be an option that we could offer some different opportunities to our students in the future. So it both kind of addresses a short-term need, but may open up some future opportunities for us as well. What questions do you have? Mr. Williams, anything you want to add or?
No, I would just say that we did have the opportunity to talk to some other districts in Kansas that have used this program, and we've had positive results back from them. They felt like their test scores actually didn't drop. They stayed the same or increased with some of this. And so there weren't any really red flags in our direction when we did like reference checks.
At least one district in Western Kansas responded that they've been using Elevate to teach all of their science classes as well as their foreign language classes for, I think, 2 years. This will be year 3 of science. And I can't remember if it's their first or second year going the world language route. So there are places in Kansas that have been utilizing Elevate.
Dr. Robinson, I got a couple comments. First of all, thanks for all your hard work in coming up with a solution in a difficult situation. First question was, I'm assuming this teacher would only be teaching that class, not multiple classes across the state because of the timing. And the second thing is, how would they handle any lab work?
You want to talk? Go ahead.
The teacher would teach 6 sections of integrated science for us, so that aligns with their physical science class. There would be labs, so that teaching assistant that Dr. Robinson discussed, they actually refer to that in Elevate as the classroom coach. So the classroom coach and that instructor meet on a regular basis, and they would help plan and prep and then facilitate those lab work. So one of the reasons why this was an attractive option to us for this problem is because it would allow the students to still continue those hands-on labs that are so important in science classes. So that classroom coach, that teaching assistant would help facilitate that work, prepping that, assisting the students, while the instructor on the screen is kind of leading the lab and providing the directions, but those labs would still continue.
That's great. I'm glad they've got that part figured out. Thank you.
And I should just mention that classroom coach does receive a week of professional development with Elevate. That's part of the contract. So they do get some direct professional learning and coaching from the company on how to make that relationship really solid before the class begins.
Do you have somebody in mind for that classroom coach position?
Yes, we've started talking with a couple of different people, or about a couple of different people. I think we were waiting to see where the board was before Mrs. Hagney and Mr. Williams initiate conversations with those individuals.
I mean, hearing the dilemma, basically, that's kind of going on probably all over the country, and hearing, when we reviewed the packet now, I mean, I think it sounds like a kind of a best case scenario. I was trying to, as I was thinking about it, putting myself in a parent role of what I think the communication is going to be really key with this. And it was hard for me to go back after kind of knowing the backstory to think of what my reaction would be as a parent. I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge.
Well, and Mrs. Mitchell, if I can comment on that. So Dr. Luttrell mentioned at the beginning that the board will have to decide the appropriate timeline for approving this. Obviously, there's Elevate's timeline for getting teachers prepped and training done. I think the earlier the board can make a decision, and I know we're just now bringing it to you. So I respect needing some time to hear it, but will help both Mr. Williams and our communication department in being able to get information out appropriately to parents and to students, and being able to make adjustments in cases where this is just not viewed as an acceptable option. So
I want to ask the obvious question. How come we're not looking at using Insight or
yeah,
that we've got in our district?
So I didn't mention that earlier. We actually talked to Insight back in the spring. And Insight has some of the same issues that we have right now, in that they have limits to their class size as well. And being able to incorporate the number of students we have, they wouldn't have been able to incorporate them all into the science classes that they have available. But we did look at that as an option.
Okay.
Back in the spring.
I assumed you'd had, but I just didn't
no,
hear
it's a good question.
So I have a question. Obviously, this is a very pricey option. Have we looked at giving a very large bonus so that we can get a long-term person here and not have, I mean, this is when you think everyone has access to it, right? I mean, I don't want to say the numbers. Yeah. It's $108,000, and that doesn't include your long-term sub or any plan time, conference time, at Bronco hour, student assistant time. I know that this would be what's best for the kids, obviously, but I just want to make sure we've exhausted all of our, and I think I have this similar concerns that I feel as Sharon has, maybe our parents. I wonder what our parents will say.
Yeah. I think we wonder what parents will say. I think our other options available to us probably get different reactions from different people as well. As far as the bonuses for staff, I would mention just two things. One, we do have a system in place for hard to fill positions that I think this year it probably helped us in retaining a few of our staff, but it's probably something we can continue to look at and look at ways to improve. I think the other piece that was discussed around the negotiations timeline was really continuing to look at ways to address our overall salary schedule. Part of this, Mrs. Hackney in her presentation mentioned the retention piece, and retention is going to be even more important than recruiting the next couple of years, because there aren't a large number of science teachers coming out. So we need to make sure we've got a good work environment and a good pay structure to keep the people that we have. The other piece currently, it would be really difficult, even if they were to accept an additional stipend right now, to stretch our science department any thinner than they already are. And we definitely wouldn't be able to accommodate the 140 students in our current science offerings.
So can you hear me?
Yep.
I have some concerns too. I mean, I can appreciate that in fact, I feel the anxiety, even not being directly in the room, but I can imagine that all of you, Mark, are feeling that pressure of 3 weeks. I mean, that sounds very close. So I do have concerns. When I first read about this, reading through the packet, concerns about the parents. I mean, as a parent, I know that I wouldn't be okay with this. But then also the precedent set. Like, I don't know that I don't know that I like that precedent set that this could be the future that we want to potentially head down. But also to Nicole's point, the precedent set of, I mean, that's a big income, and I want to be careful with the message that sends to our current teachers. I realize, I hear what you're saying, that this is kind of college, junior college, but an 18 to 22-year-old is a lot different than a high schooler student. And if there are no other options, I mean, I don't know. What other districts? I know that I had reached out to, none of our local area districts are doing any of this in Johnson County, but when you refer to the other districts, who have we called on for that, or?
Yeah. I think if you look closely, all the Johnson County school will be starting with either some kind of long-term stub set up in either science or math, or there are districts that have aggressively tried to move their middle school teachers up into the high school, which again, in a larger system is probably more doable. Right now, we would probably risk losing some people, but also most of them are not licensed to teach these courses. So looking at when I mentioned neighbors, we have in our teaching and learning departments been in contact with multiple other departments in the Johnson County area, looking at what they're doing. We're going to see this become a bigger challenge over the next couple of years because there aren't as many teachers coming out as there are individuals leaving the profession.
Sure.
It's
And
not just a spring home.
Right. And to clarify, the only ones that I reached out to were board members from Olathe, Blue Valley, and Gardner. So I hadn't checked all of Johnson County, but those 3 weren't using any kind of virtual yet. I am very apprehensive about it. Is there a way to, or have the districts that you've been in contact with that have done this, that have used this specific program? They have said that they haven't seen any decrease in test scores. Is there a way, do we have any kind of plans to monitor that? Or I feel like that might give parents a little peace of mind if we say we're going to test maybe halfway through the first quarter, at the end of the quarter. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question, Allie. This is Mark, by the way. Since when we started talking to Elevate, we talked about our PLC process and how our science department uses classroom data and some on their essential standards. We will continue doing that even with this class. They will still have the same essential standards. They'll get tested and we'll be able to monitor their classroom data and make any necessary suggestions or changes that we need to make throughout the school year to make sure we're monitoring that task on that aspect on that. And to answer some of your questions, most of them that we've talked to are probably in central western Kansas that use some of this Elevate program. And when I'm talking central, even though I'm from central, it's probably Topeka West with some of that aspect there that we've talked to on that. But yeah, we plan on still monitoring the classroom data to make sure we're getting what we need to get.
Any other questions? Well, we have a significant problem that we have to solve. I think you've looked at a lot of different solutions. This one, based on your expertise, has bubbled up to the top. And to me, I think the communications with parents is critical. I think also something I haven't heard mentioned is the key is that an in-class person. Is that the differentiator between other organizations? So it's not just students staring at a screen. There's actually someone within the classroom that can provide that support. And I think that's a critical understanding. As a parent, I would be put more at ease with that. Discipline, keeping folks focused on what's going on the content and learning. I think that in my mind, anyway, that's what tips us towards the positive, or at least being elevated. I mean, we have to make sure that we give you the latitude to accomplish providing science education to 140 students, and we don't want to we can't hamstring you and your ability to provide that through additional stress on our current science team. So, as far as best for kids, if we think about that, having a certified licensed instructor is really important, and not doing that to the detriment of the culture or the environment of the current science team.
And it is our goal to maintain this as a hands-on, lab-driven class for students. So to your point, Mr. Updike, it is important that that person is there live for all 6 sections of the course throughout the school day. So that is a differentiator between this particular program versus others that offer more video-based. Watch this and do some self-paced activities, which we think is a little bit less of an experience for our students. So this is kind of what differentiates that, is that live instruction, the ability to continue with labs, and a hands-on atmosphere for science.
Also, I think another piece is the flexibility within the contract, so that we will hopefully find a permanent person that we can still use this contract for other benefits, other gains.
Yeah, and there are some
Value.
other options. So if we are able to find an individual to take over the in-person science instruction, then we would be able to repurpose this contract for some other opportunities that we know our students are interested in. So for instance, they would love to have an American Sign Language course as part of the world language offerings. It's not something we currently offer, but our students have said through many interest surveys that that's something they would like to pursue. So if that were the case, that would be one option, for example, of how we could repurpose that contract and give some student choice to our kids in the area of world language.
The other thing I would mention as far as the contract is concerned, if we're to hire a person who's transitioning their license into teaching, it could be too that you could use this as a support while we're mentoring and training that individual. So for example, some of the individuals we've talked to are in the science profession, but not licensed to teach yet. They would need to go through one of the new apprentice programs or a transition to teaching type option. This may give an option too for them to be able to see live instruction, know what that should look like, as we're still getting those other pieces up to speed. So I know from talking to Mr. Williams, they're still recruiting hard. So hopefully we can find a candidate, but it may be a resource for supporting a new individual as well.
So just for clarity, thank you for that input too. I do agree, Doug, what's best for kids should always be the focus. But with that, so it isn't, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology. So we are looking then at, to Doug's point, that maybe it's a positive that we do have somebody in the classroom, and I don't know who else said this, but we are still going to be providing labs. So we'll have somebody in the classroom. So so it wouldn't be a rotating person. We're looking at having continuity then with just one person that would be in that classroom for those kids to connect with.
Yes.
Okay. And then
Sweet. Right to the point.
okay. And then the contract, we're able to break the contract at any time then.
We're not able to break the contract. We would still have a contract for a full school year, but we would be able to repurpose the contract for other courses if we were to hire a science teacher.
Oh, so, okay, so you could switch, oh, okay. So we'd be locked into that. Well, I think Nicole said it was 108,000 a year for the year, but if it was, we hired a biology teacher, then now we could move them to art or something, that contract is something else.
Yeah, we've discussed a couple of options that are in. So for example, intervention at the high school is always a need. That could be a possibility. Dr. Smith mentioned ASL, American Sign Language. Like you get into some things that are preferred options for our students that are hard to find an instructor. There may be some opportunities if we were able to find a December grad, for example, that we could offer something different in the second semester.
I'm assuming that this is probably spelled out in the contract and it's a little bit in the weeds, but if the person was sick one day, or do they provide a sub, or does the district provide a sub?
No, they do. They provide a sub to provide the instruction. If our classroom coach is gone, that would be our responsibility. But the instructor, they would provide a substitute for.
So I have, as we're talking about student success, do you plan to do some sort of evaluation like at semester to see, like making sure there's not something really obvious that this isn't for our students, or it's not a successful tactic, like just to evaluate it? I mean, there's a plan for that.
From a curriculum standpoint, like Mr. Williams said, we'll continue to monitor the student data, and we'll meet with that science department to talk about, as a PLC, whether or not our students are mastering all of the curricular standards. We'll certainly consider, getting feedback from our students too, as far as the learning modality, if that's working for them or if they're having any struggles. Because like Dr. Robinson said, it is an opportunity for us to consider, at some point, would a model like this work for something like an American Sign Language class or another type of course that our students have been interested in, but we haven't really had candidates for those types of positions either. So we will be able to monitor it in several ways, both with the student data and student perception.
I think the key is that we hold everything to our current standard. I mean, we're not going to change our standards because we're hiring Elevate, right? I mean, that's the key, is that we maintain our standard of excellence. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion?
I just want to say we've come across a situation I don't think we've ever been in before, and it sounds like our administrators have done a really good job of finding the best alternative there is at the moment.
I'd put a plug in again for your team here. I think Michelle came across it originally and kicked it to the rest of this group in teaching and learning, and Mr. Williams have really taken it and run with it. So a big thank you to all of them for their work on this.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to our next.
Do we need to give some kind of a direction on how we want to go with this in the essence of time, or do we?
I think the last thing we're going to talk about is possible special meeting day as an action item, but it's something we should think about between now and then.
Sounds good.
Okay. Information on Kansas graduation requirements, weighted grades, and laud recognition.
Yes, we have, as we know, we've been talking about for some time, especially came up during the Listen and Learn tour last fall, and had been in discussion phase prior to that time, even of trying to transition to a system of weighted grades, laud recognition. And we felt the timing was right to bring all that on board because of the fact that state of Kansas Board of Education approved last year some new graduation requirements that will go into effect for the graduating class of, I think it's 29 is whenever they will be.
28.
28, because 28, not this, because it's next year's incoming freshman, 24, 25. And so we're going to be working this fall on bringing back a recommendation on what such a transition would look like in terms of the process, and that preferably would like to do that by the time our pre-enrollment in that starts, registration early in the winter. And so anyway, here this evening to kind of give you a brief overview of what we're looking at and what that process might look like in terms of who's going to be involved and lead that, and as well as bringing it through fruition, hopefully for a final approval for your consideration. We have again, Dr. Smith and Kristen Zuck.
Thank you. So like Dr. Luttrell said, I know that the Board of Education and during the Listen and Learn tour, Dr. Luttrell heard many times from families and students that they would like us to pursue and consider a weighted grades and a laude system for recognition for graduation. And so we have a process that we put together to dive a little bit deeper into this and potentially bring a recommendation to the board later in the fall. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Kristen. She's leading the effort and meeting with our stakeholders and teams to dive into this research and this process. And she'll share a little bit about how we're going to go about this for the fall semester.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. This is something that I know has been on people's minds for a while. I've heard a lot about it, just visiting the schools and the staff. And I know, like Dr. Luttrell said, he heard a lot about this on his Listen and Learn tour. And the goal of this process that we're going through is going to be just to research what the weighted grades in the Latin honor system, just comparing those two different things and what an implementation here in Spring Hill might look like. And because we want to be responsive to all of our stakeholders. So when we hear something that comes up often that we can look into, then we feel like we should. So that's what this process is going to be about. And just really brief overview of what we mean when we say these things, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So a weighted grade is when you apply an additional numerical advantage to those higher level courses. So those letter grades that they receive end up getting additional weighting, and it's just applied to your most rigorous courses that take the most time and the most commitment from our students. And they're pretty standard across districts, but again, we could take a look at that and see what we would recommend here in Spring Hill. And the idea of doing this is that it encourages students to take those more rigorous courses, and they don't need to worry about their GPAs being lower because they are taking harder classes. So it also promotes them in reaching those, challenging themselves and going beyond just what's needed for requirements and pushing themselves a little bit harder without worry that they might actually be detrimental to them. It allows them to remain competitive with our neighboring districts, and also because those higher ed programs, whatever they may be, so whether you're looking at a four-year university or any of these other programs that the students like to do, they do look for evidence of challenging courses. And so by allowing those courses to have that extra weight, it encourages kids to also broaden the courses that they're taking so that their transcripts kind of have more of that. And those aren't typically, they don't need to be just your core areas. So they usually are really spread out among like your performing and your visual arts. There are opportunities for this in our CTE courses, like those capstone courses. So keeping in mind that this isn't just for your English and your math or something like that. So we do want to keep an open mind as to what grades would get weighted. And then the reason we're looking at the Latin honor system is just that we want to make sure that when we recognize and honor students, that we do it in a way that is consistent. And so this is typically, it applies a consistent standard across the board for all students. And you determine, you've seen these, I'm sure, your summa cum laude, magna cum laude, and just cum laude. And what it does is it creates a set criteria that all students that reach that are then recognized, so that you have a place for all students to have those honors. And again, it kind of honors a broader spectrum of academic accomplishments when you do that. It is fundamentally pretty equitable when you do that. And it is also widely recognized and used by colleges, universities, trade schools, and employers. So it is the designation that you would have on a transcript or when you're applying for scholarships or programs or resumes that is widely recognized. So we just want to do things that will encourage our students and help them receive those honors. So we'll look into this and kind of see what that could look like for our students in our district. So our next steps, here's just kind of a timeline of what we'd like to do. These are the actions. We'll organize a focus group next month when everybody returns. And I know there's a group that has already been looking at this for the past couple of years from the high school. I know that Mark's worked with, so we'll reach out to them because we want to honor the work that they've already done, but then also just see if there are other people who are interested, if this is something they feel passionate about. We have met and will continue to meet with students. I know the superintendent's advisory, we went and met with them and talked with them about this and got a lot of feedback. They had a lot of things to say about it. So we'll continue to get input from the students. And then in September, we'll spend some time kind of researching what our neighboring districts are doing, what their formulas look like, decide if we want to pursue this, what our formula looks like for weighted grades, what would our standards be for that Latin honor system. And then in October, have put together a vision and an implementation plan for Spring Hill, what we think that group decides would look right here, what we think would fit the best for us, getting input from all those stakeholders. And then in the fall, at some point, I don't know the exact dates. So we just meant sometime this fall, we would communicate with the site council, make sure that we present to them. They see what our process looks like, what that idea is for us, and get some feedback from them as well. And then at the November 13th board meeting, we'd like to bring that proposal to the board so that if those are approved, we'd like to make sure those are in place before the program planning guide goes out and students start enrolling, because this will impact what courses they choose. Because they are very careful, a lot of them, to select courses that they know will help them, but also not hinder their GPA. So we want to make sure any decision that's made is made in time before students start making their course selections. And again, here's just kind of that timeline. We'd like if we move forward with it, we're looking at a November approval, and then we can kind of tie that implementation in the same time as those graduation requirement changes, and we're moving forward with real world learning. So they all do really work together in providing opportunities for our kids and encouraging them to take those extra challenging, placements out there and those kinds of things. And then all of that would begin in that 24-25 school year. Anything you wanted to add? Do you guys have any questions about the process or anything?
I guess you just have to work out how you transition what grades and stuff, so you didn't. Because somebody.
We thought we would kind of see.
Not gonna make it for whatever.
And I think that'll probably be the biggest question, is how we do that in a way that supports and helps the most kids in a way that seems equitable. So I think a couple of things. I know one of our neighboring districts did it, transition to weighted grades, in the last 10 years. So that's fairly recently. I would be interested in how that went for them and the processes they learned, but also then talking just to our stakeholders, like what do they want to do? What's their feedback? What do they believe? So just listening to the people that we'll be working with. But that would be part of our
impact.
Yeah.
That's probably was my biggest concern, is the transition, the people kind of in the middle. If just having kids go through this whole process, if I remember correctly, when most of their applications, it asks if you have weighted grades or not. So if you don't, they kind of look at your grade point average a little differently. But if you say yes, and you still haven't had very many opportunities to gain more weighting to your grade, then it could actually work against you. So I don't know. I do think it might be helpful to actually talk to some recent graduates and maybe how it hindered, or they think it would have hindered or helped them compared to like their peers in college now. And you probably have a pretty good, just people's children, you could probably have pretty good cross-section of people to talk to.
For sure. Well, and I have two that just graduated last year, and they do typically ask for weighted and unweighted. But the part that this encourages is it encourages students to just take the more challenging courses. And so even by taking them, if they don't get that A, it is still really improves their learning and their academic ability and when they move on to the next rigorous course. So really it's the experience that we want to encourage them to take. But colleges are pretty aware of that. That's typically why they ask for weighted and unweighted. But it often does help them in scholarships, particularly if they have those higher GPAs with the weightings. So there's some different areas and different ways to look at that, but really just encouraging them to take those courses.
And 10 years ago, we didn't really have as many of those courses. So right. I think it's probably time to transition to something different, but I just have a concern with people in the middle. You know?
And to kind of follow along with what Sharon was saying, I think that I guess my question would be, do we really have enough of the higher level courses yet, or will we at the 24-25 year that would make this worthwhile, and not, if you only had 5 courses, it's not that.
So we have several right now. We just added 2 more in the area of social studies for this coming school year. But the goal would be we already have plans in our 5-year, plan to look at growing our programming, because that's a lot of feedback we've heard from students and families and teachers that they would like to grow the programming and introduce more of those opportunities that goes along with real world learning. Because actually one of the ways you get those market value assets is having those higher level courses. So we do need to look at increasing those. But again, it goes with increasing staffing and some trainings and other things. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But the goal is to increase those opportunities. And again, it isn't just for your math areas and things like that. It can be, it could be some theater classes as we get into those pathways. A lot of those, the higher level, what you would consider a capstone course, will often count as a weighted course as well.
I personally really support it a lot. I just think we need to not be totally tied in with a time frame to make sure our courses and our transition works properly and is equitable.
Okay. Any other questions?
Other questions or comments?
Anything you want to say?
Thank you. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Great
Great topic.
presentation. Moving on to our discussion item on information on incorporating swimming as a cooperative sport. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, Mr. Freegan from Spring Hill High School is here to share some information about an opportunity that's become available if the district would so choose, that would allow some of our students to participate in competitive swimming through the Kansas High School Activity Association as a cooperative sport. And Mr. Freegan is here and going to kind of tell you how that came to light and what's involved with that aspect.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Luttrell. Oh, I have a coaching voice too. Sorry, I'll stand back a little bit. Keep Mark awake. But what's tonight, and you guys always hear about growth, and that's obviously a topic of every night of a board meeting with you guys with Spring Hill District as we continue to grow. And I think as an athletic director, I continue to look for ways to provide opportunities for those students. We're looking at being over 1,000 kids for this year. And so I think every opportunity we can get at to try to add opportunities for our kids is important to be able to do. So that's something that, as far as CASHA sanctioned sports, there's 15 of them. We don't offer unified bowling or bowling, gymnastics, or swim. And so last spring, and starting to talk about some of those things, hearing of interest from different students, and then also just interacting with the Paola athletic director, Lewisburg athletic director, who's already part of a cooperative with Osawatomie. That really formed this type of idea to be able to look at, hey, why can't Spring Hill be a part of that cooperative as well? So talked to the Osawatomie athletic director. Their numbers were quite down this past year as far as within their cooperative. And so he was really excited to be able to get Spring Hill on board and to form that cooperative. So a cooperative is, again, a group of school districts combined together. Even though we're 5A and they're 4A, we can still provide that and become a cooperative together. They are for 2-year increments. We're looking at this proposal as a 4-year plan, as far as that's how far out we're thinking about still becoming a member of that. When looking at this as far as facility wise, this is definitely a great opportunity as well. Obviously, those other sports I mentioned or other activities, that would be hard to come by as far as that. And with Osawatomie having a pool right beside their high school, they already have their coaches. They have a head coach, they have an assistant coach. And so numbers are on there as far as how much what we'd have to provide, $4,300. And that's for both the girls and boys season. The boys season is during the winter. The girls season is during the spring. And as you can tell in there, we did send out a survey, and we surveyed all 9th through 11th graders last spring. And that's the results we got back, which were pretty high. And I know some of them just took that survey, but I did specify as far as, and on that, I did specify that you'd have to provide your own transportation, and we can talk more about that. But, and it specified that they would not be able to do dual sports either, so that they would have to declare that to be their singular sport just because of the travel involved and also the training involved in order to be able to do this. As far as, I'm trying to think of anything I didn't cover here. And again, all the scheduling has already been done. Osawatomie has already scheduled 9 events for both girls and boys. So they already have 9 different events planned. For the postseason, we would have to be separated from the co-op, and we would be represented as Spring Hill if anyone were to qualify. And there's cuts that they have. Swimming's easy as far as you have to make the cut, make the number to be able to advance in that. And that would be held in Topeka. It goes back and forth between Topeka and Shawnee Mission as far as who hosts that. So it'll be in Topeka next spring. You guys have any questions for me?
I've got one.
Yeah.
I guess I love the idea. I think it'd be great to add this opportunity for our students, and I think it was great you reached out to look into it. I have a little bit of concern with students provide their own transportation. I mean, it sure would be awful good to be able to at least provide a small van or something. Because that I don't know, just seems like putting kids on a 30-minute drive down to Osawatomie every week, every day is a deal.
And I've struggled with that too. And that's something, I mean, as far as being a CTE coordinator as well in that world, as far as letting kids go off and drive and go to internships and go up to a Lathe Advanced Technical Center and drive themselves. And something I think comparable wise, I mean, we have a kid that leaves for hockey practices and he drives himself every day to hockey practices. That's not there. There's other, there's all sorts of club practices that kids do go to that we allow them. Now, I understand that concern as far as, and that's why I did put on there as far as a bus could be looked at as an option, especially if we have larger numbers. I did reach out to Apple Bus, or not, sorry, that's my old thinking there. I reached out to First Student, and they did give me some numbers on that. I thought they were a little bit high. It was about $100 every day, every trip that they'd have to make. It'd be $100 is what their estimate was. But they did think that they could provide that transportation. Since we're talking about winter and then spring, it's a little ways out as far as I know. There are a couple of drivers short right now, she said, but I think by that time she said that they would feel confident enough to be able to provide that. So we can definitely look at that. It'd be nice to know numbers too, to know if we need a bus or can we just use a school vehicle as well.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
So we'll definitely consider that. We would obviously have parents writing off, and we'd have Dr. Robinson looking over that, Dr. Luttrell looking over that release if we do have students do their own transportation.
Sure.
I've never really been involved in swimming team sport. So is there a set number of students you can take to a meet? Like, are they going to have to do cuts? Like if we come in with 26 boys and 51 girls, are they going to have to cut the team?
They said they would not have any cuts. So, and because Dr. Luttrell asked that same question as far as, or where we have any cuts, what would we do? And so to the answer to that would be no, that they would accommodate us and not have any cuts. So I think they could work around that and be able to figure out how to get everybody involved.
The first week of practice might be kind of hard.
Yes.
Would this limit freshmen who maybe can't drive yet from being able to participate?
Potentially it could if we did have students do their own transportation. That's something we could talk about as far as how we can do that. And both Lewisburg and Paola have their students drive themselves. And I did map that out. We're the same distance. Lewisburg and Spring Hill are the same distance to Osawatomie. So.
Any other, go ahead. Yeah.
Excellent.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay. And as far as, and again, we have a little time before, so we can kind of work through some of those things. We just mainly have to have approval. By September 1st, we have to sign this cooperative, and that's all done online, and it's already ready to go. So, and that's again, for boys swimming, and then not till January 1st for girls swimming. But
are there any concerns from current sports and coaches about this taking away from like enough to really have a competitive team of their sports?
I talked to some head coaches in both of those, and there wasn't that concern. No.
Okay.
And I know as far as all our head coaches, we want kids to be doing what they're passionate about. If they're really passionate about that sport, then that's what we want to provide for them.
It sounds like a great plan. I know we talked about this years ago and we didn't have any options at that time. So it's exciting to see a good option come up that we can get on board with. Thanks for you guys getting it all put together.
You're welcome.
Very good. Anything else? Any other questions, comments?
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, moving on to board policies and regulations. Dr. Latrobe.
We did get some recent policy revisions from KSB. These are but all essentially a direct result of legislation or whatever that has recently, in the not too distant future, has gone into effect that we are bringing before you tonight for discussion. Dr. Robinson's going to give you some insight on those.
Well, there's a couple of things I would mention with policies that's going on behind the scenes just to make you aware of. One of those very soon, probably in the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to see all of your board policies in board docs. Our communications department, Mrs. Henderson and I, kind of a team approach of getting them uploaded and cleaned up. They are in there now. If you go in, there's a policy tab. They're in draft right now, but they will come out of draft once we have them all cleaned up. There's still a few of them missing, and there's a few of them that we're hoping to rely on some expertise of our former board clerk to make sure we've got the most up to date. So I will tell you, when you look in what was provided to you, it will give you a little bit of a glimpse as to what the board docs format looks like. We've moved them to PDF. And so it actually has a pretty sharp process that once the board approves revisions, with one click, we can accept the changes and they'll be live for you to be able to see them. So I'm going to hit pretty high level tonight on the policies that are being revised. I would tell you all of the recommendations here came from KSB to start with, and then Mr. Goheen and I have looked at them and made sure that sometimes Spring Hill's policy is slightly different. And so we kind of work through that. So quick run through GAAF, emergency safety intervention. This is related to seclusion and restraint. Very few changes. Essentially, they changed the definition of isolation slightly and added some wording related to purposeful isolation. Usually when it's coming from a special ed statute, it was probably related to some kind of legal issue that a district ran into. So the revision that KSB is recommending aligns with the changes in state statute with the definitions. The military leave one below is a change in federal law. It's a small change unless you're that individual, but if an individual serves in the military for over 30 days, this extends how long they would be eligible for employee-sponsored healthcare from 18 months to 24 months. It's already in federal law, which would trump our policy anyway. So it just gets our policy in compliance with the federal change. IFCC is a new policy. This policy, if you were following legislation in the spring, requires that any school-sponsored trip that we would set up accommodations based on individuals' biological gender at birth. It is in the statute, so you could choose to do nothing with it, but it would put us out of compliance. That statute actually requires the district to create a policy. that policy has to be provided to any student and family that is attending an overnight trip as well.
What is our overnight policy?
This is all new. We didn't have one previously.
Well, and so that you're referring to what was passed recently in the legislature, right? Yeah,
Yes.
That it has to be identified as gender assigned at birth.
Yeah. Policy aside, I think this is really going to come down to, and it was one of the conversations we had with our athletic directors this week, is when we encounter this situation, it's really going to come down to communication and how our administrators step up and manage the situation. The policy really just puts us in compliance with what's in state statute at this point. The JBE is our truancy piece. Biggest change here is there was a change in it's not a change in special education law, but they were putting some clarification to it because the previous policy led some to believe that students that were in special education or gifted education were exempt from truancy guidelines. And so there were some cleanup in the state statute, which then preceded us making the change in ours just to make sure that parents are aware and that our administrators could enforce truancy. Even if a student is on an IEP, they would still fall under the compulsory education expectations for attendance. JDD suspension and expulsion procedures. There was one change to this that's worth noting, and really what we already had into our policy that a hearing, our policy previously said a hearing would be scheduled within 20 days. Legislative changes have wanted to clarify that the hearing must be held within 20 days. So it's just a cleanup of wording and suspension and expulsion. Working with our legal counsel, we made a few other small changes to just cleaning up that there are several places where it's either the superintendent or a designee of the Board of Education. And so giving you the option of assigning who those hearing officers are gives you a little bit more flexibility for the future. And then Mr. Goheen looked at a couple of the things that KSB had provided to make sure that we were still being clear that our administrators have the authority to determine a suspension initially. So, but the biggest change to this was that the hearings must be held within 20 days, not scheduled within 20 days. I'm going to skip JH and come back to it because it's probably the most significant change here. KK, it was a policy we already had. It changed titles. Really this, when it talks disposal of district property, the part that added is really the procedure for determining if we were to sell a facility, a building. So if the district was to determine that we were going to, which as fast as we're growing, we don't have this option, but if we were going to close the school and sell the property, it gives the state of Kansas first right to determine whether or not they want to purchase that facility from us. It was changed in statute. If they, I think it's 180 days. If they don't purchase it, then we would have the right to sell it outright. I can see your faces, and I know you're going to have the same question I do, but go ahead.
I was wondering how this impacted Hilltop.
I think I'd have to check. I'll have Mr. Goheen look at it, but I think you've already got a contract in place. So I think you'd be okay, but I'll have him look at it just to be sure.
It sold years ago.
Yeah.
That's right. We just had a lease back, right? It wasn't a delayed sale. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you.
This one has raised some questions because of just how buildings are purchased and not every, the funding source, different funding sources that are used to build buildings. And, but for policy's sake, it aligns our policy with what's already in state statute and keeps us in compliance that way. JH is probably the biggest change to our policy. JH allows your homeschool students to homeschool and non-public private school students. So if it's a private school that's not accredited by KSDE, it would allow them to participate in activities and athletics. We are still, I would tell you this one will probably impact some other policies as we go, because there's some things that we're still looking at related to how Keisha's separating the policies for homeschool students from virtual school. So there may be some other, there may be an additional policy that relates to this that needs to come back to the board at some point. But the bigger change is really what it allows our administrators to do is they have two responsibilities. And when a homeschool student or a non-public private school student wants to participate in sports, one is to make sure that they have an address within our school district boundary. And two is to make sure that parents provide documentation, which is either an affidavit or a transcript that shows that the student is making progress towards graduation. If you remember right, our students that are in the high school already are expected to pass 5 classes to remain eligible. There is a different expectation for students that are homeschooling. And really it comes down to the parent or school that they're attending verifying that they're making progress. So part of the way we adjusted the policy, or KSB recommended adjusting the policy, you'll see quite a bit taken out. And you'll see wording that suggests that all of the Keisha guidelines would still be applicable. The reason for that is you're really using 2 sets of rules for 2 different groups of people. We did go through and make sure all of the pieces that the board had emphasized in previous policy, they're straight out of Keisha guidelines. So we haven't lost those expectations, but it will allow us to follow the Keisha rules, which is why I say the virtual piece may be a piece we need to come back and look at, because our expectations for virtual students doesn't match Keisha guidelines currently. So we'll look closer at that and work with Insight to make sure as to how we want to make an adjustment, and we'll come back to the board when we have that revision. It does create a lot of questions for us. I met Friday with our middle school and high school athletic directors to kind of work through the process. Currently, our plan with middle school is to go by address by boundary. So if we have a middle school student who wants to participate, we would assign them to the school where they live just to keep things clean and make sure we could sustain it moving forward. High school is a little bit easier because as long as they have an address within the Spring Hill School District boundaries, they would be eligible to participate. So we're working through some of those things. We're working on what their registration enrollment type process will look like in Skyward, trying to get all of those things. I would tell you, since it's gone active, we've had 1 family inquire. So I don't know that at least initially we're going to see a large number of students, but we want to make sure we get our policy and procedures right so we can manage for the future.
So this isn't just athletics, it's all activities.
It's any Keisha sponsored athletic event or activity.
And then is there any, going to be any kind of, I don't know what you call it, when open enrollment, it still has to be, they have to live in the district?
The way it is currently, and they could change it next session, but the way it is currently, it's only applicable for the district that you live in. They also, because it wouldn't be a move or anything like that, those students wouldn't have to sit out a semester like a student that was moving into the district. So there's some complexities to this that I think even Keisha is going to be working through. We're waiting, and we'll have a form to share with the board at some point in the next week or 2. Keisha is putting together a draft of the affidavit that parents could utilize. There's nothing in statute that says we have to use theirs, but once we see it, we'll run it through our legal counsel and just make sure that that's what we want to utilize moving forward. I'm trying to think what else with that policy, but what other questions do you have?
Sorry, just to interject there, that could change for next school year as we move towards open enrollment. It'll be interesting to see what Keisha does with that.
Yeah, and we'll await and see. It creates some other issues though, as far as students moving between school districts at that point. If legislators aren't cautious with how they do it, where you could essentially change districts without sitting out, and you could play one sport in one district and a different sport in the other. So we'll wait and see how next legislative session goes, and it very well could be, as you're suggesting, it could be one that we see a change as they come back into session.
Dr. Robinson, I have a quick question for you. I saw they removed the language requiring a school physical.
It's still in the CASA guidelines. So, and there are several things you can still require of students that are homeschooling or in a private school setting and joining the district for athletics. The physical is one of those. You can still charge any fees that you would charge to any other student for participation. We don't have currently a pay-to-play model or anything like that, but if you did, you can charge that. If they're wanting to participate in an activity like band, for example, that requires a specific class to be able to march or whatever, you can actually require them to come on campus and attend that to be able to participate. But the physical piece is still in the CASA guidelines. So it hasn't gone away. It's just moved out of our policy and falls under all of the CASA guidelines will apply.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
And this is first read. So if you see things as you look at it and have additional questions, let me know. It may be something that we need to look deeper into, and we can provide more information at the next board meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Moving on to KSB annual conference attendees. Dr. Luttrell.
Just to note that again, the annual KSB conference will be November 10th through the 12th in Wichita. Currently, we have gone ahead and signed, just registered so that we would have enough lodging for everyone that is currently a member of the Board of Education. And then in the near future, we will try to confirm that before a deadline kicks in, that if you're unable to, we could still get our money back. But then this also allows for then we can also swap out registrations in the event that if some current members can't go, but this is after the election November, if some of the new members were able to attend, we would extend them that opportunity. So currently everyone is signed up for the annual conference, and we'll be getting that more information out to you. And then, like I said, if you know you for sure can't go, just let Mrs. Henderson know, and we can definitely work to shuffle that around with, some of the others that may be coming on after the November election.
Dr. Luttrell, there is a problem with the 4 new board members going to they're not registered for the conference at this time. The setup with KASB requires that they have to have their names available to post up. I was supposed to have a link that worked that. That link doesn't work. I'll get a hold of her again tomorrow, see if I can. So those 4 new board members have not been signed up for the conference. They have hotel rooms. So that's the important thing, but we'll still try to get them. But if we have 1 or 2 current board members who's not going, then the situation is that I'll just simply swap names and go that direction. But at this point, I'm going to have to register 4 people to get everybody up. So I don't have the new board members registered for the conference yet.
But I think there's flexibility around that with the conference registration.
I'm sorry?
There's flexibility around that, I think, as Dr. Luttrell mentioned, right?
Yes,
you
but
can add people. I'm sure they would be happy to take the participants.
Not if the
addition.
Conference is sold out. And that's what they have told me.
A suggestion, though, 2 of them are running unopposed. Can we get in touch with them and see if they would like to be registered? I mean, they would be the only There's nobody running against them, so it'd only be one seat that you would have to worry about.
Yes, and I've already been in contact with them. So I know I have to sign up too. And if I have 2 board members who aren't going, but otherwise, Rachel and I will work this out so we get
Sure.
everybody into the conference. It's easier to subtract people than it is to add. But KSB cautioned me that if for some reason all the current board members want to go and all 4 of the new board members want to go, if that conference is full, they will not take them.
Okay. We'll leave it
I
in your
hope that we-
capable hands.
I hope that we can give feedback back to KSB also that when they moved it from December to November, that's a very awkward across the whole state for.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was the first discussion I had with her. That this is really causing some problems. The other thing is there are seminars for new board members that I believe are the day before.
They're on Thursday, right?
Yes. And if they're going to go to those, then I've got to get them registered for the conference and go back and extend their hotel space. So Rachel and I we're going to be juggling this until probably the day before the conference.
Not a recap.
Right.
I
It's the
think-
weekend. It's the weekend after the election. So I can ask these people, can you go? They go, well, I'm not elected yet.
So we'll leave it in your capable hands. I'm confident that you'll work through this.
Yes, we will shuffle.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else? Okay, moving on to the board work calendar. Dr. Luttrell?
Again, you see there, again, the meetings coming up throughout the course of the next school year and just currently what the myriad of topics that will be discussed. And again, as I always remind, that is an always ever-changing document to which things will be shuffled around, as well as it may not even appear there now that will come to our attention that we need to add. But that's pretty much the schedule that we write as of late last week that we had put together. We'll be going by, and then we'll be looking at that on an ongoing basis.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to Board of Education member reports. Any reports to be made? All right, moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Luttrell?
I do know that, as I mentioned earlier, late last spring, there's always, information. Anytime there's a school tragedy with any type of a school violence incident, there's always concern, and rightly so, about making sure that we're doing all we can to make sure we've got enhanced security in a variety of ways throughout the district. And one of those that continues to come up at times is, while we currently have 2 school resource officers assigned to our campus, is that sufficient? Is it something that are they distributed equally or equitably in case there was an emergency? Should we have one at every building? Should we maybe add a couple more? Of course, there's always comes down to funding. I did recently come across a survey that had been done this last spring that, again, it was just an optional to respond. Many districts throughout the state of Kansas did respond. That just shared what their enrollment was, how many school attendance centers they had, and how many SROs, if any, they had in place. I did include that there for you to review. Again, you'll see there is really no rhyme or reason to the number that districts have. However, there is through the National School Resources Officer Association, there is a recommended standard. The recommended standard, just like if, for class sizes, if you can do it, they would recommend that basically a school resource officer for approximately every 1,000 students. But again, it's kind of all over the board, and eventually it comes down to what a district, feels they can do or what they need to do to make sure that they're giving peace of mind to their students. So I just included that. We did recently, like I said, of course, the state of Kansas does allow they allowed it, the state legislature allowed it X amount of dollars for districts to apply for some grant money for security type purposes. We did submit a grant with a number of things, including, an additional SRO. We did get that back, and of the amount that we submitted across the state, they cut that way back. I think we have around 55,000 is what we can elect to choose. Of course, we had originally determined we were going to try to use, if we had a security grant, to pay some of our costs that are associated with the new system we're implementing this school year with Centegix, which will give the instant attention to law enforcement for any type of an emergency in the building, whether it be on a lower level that may not require full out attention, response from the PD, but notification to our people within the building, all the way to an incident that might require immediate notification of emergency officials. We're again getting excited about rolling that out and putting finishing touches on that. And we're getting some training with that this week, tomorrow, with our district executive leadership team. But I just put that out there. I know that in August, whenever we start looking at the budget, we'll give you what our budget picture looks like. I do have been communicating with the individual from Johnson County Sheriff's Department that oversees our school resource officers, Captain Martinez, and have inquired with him about if we did elect to go with an additional SRO to our existing two that we already have. What might that timeline look like? Could they staff it? And of course, we have not been able to touch base, hook up in person yet, but we're trying to get that scheduled. I do know that like any organization, they, of course, their first commitment is to, of course, to have their road deputies and them, staffed. And while they're getting, that into place, it's just something that, again, they constantly have to monitor themselves. But I'll know more information after I meet with him as to whether or not what that might look like. And then, of course, the other thing to consider is that's with Johnson County. There are other options out there. We could choose to possibly go with Spring Hill Police. I mean, there would be, you could go with a security officer. But again, it's not just, necessarily has to be Johnson County. There are many advantages to having a Johnson County person simply because they're able to cross municipalities and that, and because we take in two different counties, more than one city government, that is, a strong advantage. But those are just some things to keep up. But I thought you'd appreciate that information. So I put that together just pre-review, and I'll know more once after I meet with Captain Martinez to see what their timeline would be if we did want to look into that in terms of what that would look like in terms of having someone, in place and what that cost would amount to if it would align with our current agreement that we have. Also, open house, as I said at the first, is coming up Tuesday, August 8th at Forest Spring Middle School. Hope to do a ribbon cutting. I said somewhere around that 5:30 p.m. meeting, but people can come and go through the building. Then, of course, we're gearing up for our first day of school, which will be for students will be Tuesday, August the 15th, but the day prior is our annual opening ceremony, and that will be for all staff, and will be held on Monday. That will be held on the 14th, not the 3rd, but the 14th, and at Spring Hill High School in the auditorium in that morning. And each of you are definitely invited to attend. I attended my first one last year, and it was very good. And said our communications department and Dr. Smith have been working on our theme, and they telling me that everybody's going to have a great time. So hopefully you'll be able to join us.
Do you know
That's my
what time we
superintendent's
would
report.
need to be there for that time?
Breakfast, I think, is going to be around 7:30. And then I think the program starting, Christopher, right around 8:30. So 7:30 to 8:30, kind of informal coffee. And then we'll start the program at 8:30. And usually it takes about an hour and a half program. We try to stay within that if we can. That's my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Luttrell, for looking into the school resource officer. Maybe we can all help follow up with that, but if we could leave that on the list going forward, I think that would be helpful. Just an update after you talk with him.
Definitely, yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We do need an executive session this evening.
Yes, and it shouldn't take real long. I mean, we just want to share some information about a particular student matter that shouldn't take long at all, but it's just for information.
Mr. President, I move the board recess to executive session to discuss confidential student information pursuant to the exception relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under coma. Executive session to begin at 9:40 and we will reconvene no later than 10 PM in this place.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move to executive session for the purpose of to conduct a discussion on confidential student information pursuant to the exception relating to the actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under coma. Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Milius?
Yes.
Mrs. Steeling?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
We do have a final potential action item. Do we, as far as setting a special, Mr. Elliott, or Ally and
I'm here.
okay, Brent?
Looks like he's muted. There he is.
Okay, good. I guess the final agenda item is about, do we want to set a special meeting date to have an action item on the use of Elevate for our science courses for the 140 students that need that, and we need a teacher for.
I do have a question. If tomorrow you get the candidate for the job, a strong candidate, would you then still do the Elevate or just not even look at it?
No, if we saw a strong candidate before the contract signed, I think we would go that direction. We don't have
How
any
long?
applicants currently.
What is our time? Or when's the last minute?
Prior
so to
to
speak?
August 8th.
Okay.
So, and my thoughts are this is a Zoom meeting that's.
We did that before.
Yeah, we've done it before.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a special meeting. The consensus. Let's get our calendars out.
Well, we need to teach science. So.
So the 8th is 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Is the 8th is the final day.
You could do it.
What about
August
August
Monday the
1st?
7th?
The 7th?
I was just trying to make sure we were before the 8th, but I didn't know if you were trying to stay with the Monday.
Oh, either way, I think we can choose whatever day we want.
Would you rather wait till the last possible moment to see if you get a candidate or just get it done as soon as possible?
No, my concern right now would be pushing it too far back, would be getting the classroom coach trained and making sure they've got a person assigned.
And then also communicating with parents too.
Absolutely.
Is going to be
So
the longer we have.
it'd be better to do it next week sometime?
Well, and we can approve the use, but I mean, I think it's up to Dr. Luttrell and Dr. Robinson to, if they got a candidate and hired them, they just move on, they make the call.
Well, there's nothing holding us back from approving it, and then
Right.
they'll take action the best action to take.
Is there more discussion around this? Is this something we could do this evening?
I would personally like to see if we can get another candidate in.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
This does not preclude that.
Yeah.
I have a lot of apprehension about this contract at all. I'm concerned about the precedent it sets for the teachers, for what we're hoping to do going forward. It's my opinion that this would be last resort.
And I guess my comment to that would be, I think you are at last resort. I think if we were going to see a licensed applicant, we would have already seen them. Even the last two candidates were in another profession and we were trying to recruit them in. I think we've exhausted all of the context that we know outside of education, trying to pull people in. So I just don't believe you're going to see an applicant in the next 2 weeks.
Well, and if it's something that, excuse me, that we could approve this evening, I mean, I would completely trust Dr. Luttrell and Dr. Robinson to make the right decision. If they did get a candidate in before August 8th, that they just wouldn't execute the contract. right?
Yes, you can do that. You can definitely approve that. I just know that's not their normal. And that's one reason I didn't have it as an action item, because I knew it was a big issue and you all would definitely want to give a lot of thought. So, but we're flexible to do whatever you all would like to see done. The sooner, if we're going to do it, is better than later, but
Who would execute that contract? Wouldn't that, whose signature is required on the contract?
well, technically, if it's a board contract for a board contract of that nature, it would be, they usually require the board president or sometimes they will allow the designee of the board, which would be myself. But again, this was kind of another new venture, and we definitely wanted to make sure you all were aware and were involved in the decision so that there wasn't any surprises.
And I think we should go back to August 7th. Because I'd like to put my eyes on the contract. Number one, if it's something I'm going to sign, I won't sign it unless I can read it. And so the last date would be August 7th. And then I could come up here and execute the contract on the 8th. So if we did August 7th at
I can't do August 7th, but you don't need, as long as you've got enough people.
we need 4. What day can you do? Did you do the 4th?
I could probably do the 4th, yeah.
Thoughts on the 4th or the 7th?
Friday the 4th, is that what you're looking at? Let me look.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, the 4th works for me.
4th would be, Nels would be available.
As long as it's early evening, that works for me.
What's early or evening?
Like, could we do like 5?
Sure.
I could do that too.
Nicole, that'd work.
Is Brent still on?
Brent?
I think I can make that work.
Okay.
We've got a busy
So-
weekend, but I could probably do it.
Friday the 4th at 5. I'll contact Keith to see if,
Is that enough time? That's enough time to give notice on a special meeting, right?
well, let's do that. Well, let's schedule a special meeting. The agenda item is the approval of the Elevate contract.
And it will be Zoom for
It'll
sure?
be Zoom at 5 PM. You need anything else?
And in the meantime,
I'll have to vote on that.
talk to all the people you know that may know a science teacher.
Right. Well, yeah, we can own some of that. I mean, we can talk to our networks. Okay. Do you need anything else, Rachel?
It needs to be voted on.
Motion, second.
Okay. Brent, did I hear you?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm okay with it. Yeah.
You okay with oh, yeah, you said 4th would be okay.
Mr.
Yeah.
President, I move we set a special meeting for Friday, August 4th at 5 PM
For the purpose of,
for the purpose of what?
Review of the. Review approval of the,
Review of the.
Elevate contract.
Elevate contract.
Possible approval.
right.
second,
It's been seconded to establish a special meeting on August 4th at 5 PM via Zoom. The purpose of the special meeting is to review the Elevate contract with the potential to approve that contract. Any discussion or comments? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Mitchell,
yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes,
approved.
very good. Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.